Hi, my name is Cindy Garrett. I'm on the board of directors for Families Advocating for Campus Equality. I became involved in this issue when I, as an attorney, realized that this was happening, and I kept saying, but this is America, you can't do that. And the more I read, the more I said, but this is America, and so I decided I needed to do something to help the kids, especially the ones that can't afford lawyers. The problem is that the colleges, somebody said earlier, they're between a rock and a hard place. I mean, they either choose to comply with what they've been told, or, they lose their funding. I mean, it's compliance or cash, and it's a really tough position for them to be in. I think the biggest problem is, as Susan so articulately explained, the concept that the victim is telling the truth. Believe the victim. It's a presumption that victims don't lie, and literally the colleges have been told to believe the victims. This causes a burden to shift to an accused, effectively, to prove that he had consent or he had a reasonable belief that he did have consent. But his intent, his actual intent, unlike a crime, is completely irrelevant. It seems that, he doesn't need to have any intent to harm. He doesn't need to have any intent to obtain sexual gratification. He has only need to have a reasonable belief that she consented or somehow prove that she did consent. The difference, though, between the criminal process and the campus process is that in the criminal process, he's presumed innocent, whereas in the campus process, she's presumed to tell the truth. In the criminal process, the burden is on the accuser to prove his responsibility beyond a reasonable doubt. However, in the campus process, by lowering the burden of proof to preponderance, this now requires the accused to have a higher burden than just raising reasonable doubt. He has to show by the same preponderance that she's either lying or that he did have consent or reasonable belief to show that she had consent. Also, it seems from the cases, the people that have contacted FACE, we've had about 100 since we went online in July, I think. You can tell that the colleges are really taking this to heart. I mean, I have one client, I say client, he's a father that I talk to every week or so, who's obviously terrified his son is going to be expelled and, never be able to complete the education that they've been planning for his entire lifetime. And he actually took a tape recorder into a college administrator to talk, secretly tape recorded, which I guess in this state it isn't always illegal, the state he was in. And I have heard the recording, and the administrator basically said to him, tell your son to give up. We find him all guilty. That's just the way it is nowadays. Of course, when he provided that evidence, that recording to the school, they said, well, he doesn't speak for us. So, it really didn't get him anywhere, but it was very frustrating. To exacerbate the problems, we have this affirmative consent, not this craziness that's, I'm a California attorney. I started lobbying against the California consent bill, and now it's spreading like wildfire because, of course, whatever California does, everybody has to follow, at least from my perspective. So now, another presumption that's coming up through the affirmative consent policy is that he is the initiator. It is always the man that is presumed to be the initiator. And what falls from being the initiator is then he's responsible to obtain her consent. He's responsible to ensure she's not intoxicated or incapacitated, he's responsible for his own intoxication as well, and he's not allowed to use his own intoxication for his excuse, as an excuse for him misreading her consent. So here we have the man presumed to be the initiator, while the woman is presumed to be the recipient, and she's excused from anything. She's not responsible for any alcohol code violations. She doesn't have to judge his consent. She doesn't have to judge her own consent. And worst of all, her intoxicated or impaired judgment is relied upon to find him guilty. I mean, it's crazy. We have a case. I had a case. An attorney that I talked to has a case in Maryland where it wasn't even sex. I mean, it was kissing, but besides that, they were both at a party, and every single witness said she went after him. Every single witness. And yet, the school found them guilty because he was a man. So I think it's pretty apparent that this is a gender discrimination issue. It's always the man. Why is it always the man? I mean, it may be a statistical likelihood that men initiate sex more often than women, but that doesn't mean that you can blame one individual just because it's statistically likely. A lot of the cases that we see involve ongoing relationships, girlfriends, ex-girlfriends. I can't tell you how often that happens, where they're in the midst of a dating relationship, and all of a sudden one night she decides that maybe she didn't feel comfortable with how he approached her sexually. Or maybe a year later, after they break up, she decides this. I mean, this is very, very common. And the problem that I have with that is, I think back to college, and when we started college and we were all learning. I mean, it's not just learning about your career, it's learning about how to negotiate relationships. I mean, that's what college is for. You're there to kind of, trial and error. You reach out and maybe you realize it wasn't the right way.